anytime I trained something that the managers didn't believe in,
Yeah.
I just wholeheartedly believe in this idea that sales actually isn't an individual sport, and even peer-to-peer, the best teams compete with each other, but like push each other to levels that you don't get if everyone's just a lone wolf. I've rolled out film reviews 4 different times now, which it's just a fancy way of saying every week or every 2 weeks we all get together and we have come already watching a discovery call, a pricing presentation, a demo, whatever it is, and we give each other feedback.
Can you walk us through the process, like how you exactly ran it?
Yeah. So we
Hey, Phil, how's it going, my friend?
Hey, how are you, Michael?
Pretty good. Can't complain. Pretty rested, but at the same time, exhausted. It's been a very busy week, so I don't know, but I'm feeling great. How are you?
I'm good. I feel that way all the time, but maybe for different reasons, because I've got a baby and a 3-year-old that basically take over my entire life most days. So,
So yeah, I don't get to complain. Thanks for having you on the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and what you're working on these days?
yeah, thanks. I'm currently unemployed, which is super exciting. I actually, and I'll go through my quick history, but I just left a business Reputation that I was at for 11 years, if you count an acquisition, where I did most every leadership role you can think of from a go-to-market perspective. So sort of the quick version of my background is I was a broadcast journalism major in college. I did like TV radio and immediately graduated and thought I shouldn't do that. That's stupid. And moved to Chicago and worked part-time jobs and then ended up becoming a seller kind of by accident. I was at really early stage Groupon. So I sold, I became a sales manager. And after doing that for about 5 years, I got an opportunity to go to a startup where I created kind of their SMB commercial sales team. Maybe 2 years into that, I started to realize I just knew nothing about how product actually worked. Like I did not know what I was selling other than like the surface level thing marketing gave me with the slide. And so I became a sales engineer mostly because I was really interested in our head of product, and that role at the time reported into him. So I shadowed product managers, I shadowed engineers, front end, back end, and I just started kind of learning how the things actually worked, how the sausage was made. And it sort of jump started my career in a weird way because I found I was way better at selling once I knew what I was doing. I found being a sales engineer almost lessened the pressure of a client call in a way that just made me better at discovery because, I don't know, I didn't like feel the weight of quota at that point on my shoulders. I get quotas later in my career. And then it kind of took off. And eventually I ended up, that company got acquired into Reputation, where I've done everything from being the lead SE to running SEs, running SDRs, running field enablement. I ran product marketing for about 18 months. And then I ran enterprise sales at the end of my tenure. So sort of ran the gamut of, I don't know, mostly sales specific roles, but a little bit of marketing sprinkled in there, and kind of had to figure out how to work together with other leaders and other departments. And I think on my good days, I'm just a simple, practical person who tries to accomplish things. And, you know, hopefully I get to do that more often than not.
I love it, man. It sounds like your journey is more interesting than, many other, folks on the show, I would say. Don't hate me, guys, because you wear multiple different hats, and it's always exciting to learn about other functions. So, look, I'm curious because you mentioned Groupon and you work with, I would say, more experienced orgs after, first startups, and correct me if I'm wrong. Where do you see the biggest communication, breakdown between sales, product, and marketing? And why do you think it persists even in experienced organizations?
I think it kind of starts with a real understanding of what each of those departments and even like the sub departments within them's roles, like what their roles actually are and what they're trying to accomplish. The amount of times I would be in a room where a marketing person would comment about a salesperson's pipeline generation and not really have a feel for what that salesperson was being asked to or has been trained to do, and vice versa. This is not me complaining about marketing thing. The same thing goes with the salesperson being like a demand generator. Like, why don't they just get me more leads? And I feel like too often we didn't take the time to explain what each role was meant to be there for and how it was ultimately supposed to be a cohesive thing. And it's what leads to finger pointing, right? Like if you don't really know, but you think you're struggling at something, then you go find a reason that it's not your fault. Like I've seen that across the board. And my one quick story, because I don't think I'd be a product marketing leader again, but I'm really glad I did it because I didn't understand, an NPI process where you're introducing new products and features and like all the stuff that goes into why you choose thing A over thing B and then how you talk about it and enable the field. Like at the end of the day, I used to judge product teams and product team members for moving too slowly, or why did you release that thing and not something else that clearly is a more important feature that you could have developed? And I had no idea what went into that. And I'm not saying that every decision is always perfect, but with it, when you have an understanding of that, you then have a way to communicate back to them where if I do really have a point of view that we should be developing
Mm,
feature A over feature B, then I can frame it in a way that says, I get where you're at in this process. Here's why I think this thing might be the choice. And you can engage in a real way. Yeah,
mhm.
I think it comes down to just knowing why people are there and what their role's supposed to be.
This is really interesting. You know why? Because right now we have a lot of enablement folks actually watching this. And I think this tells me that maybe for sales orgs in particular, we need maybe enablement around how functions work internally. Because we really focus on buyer personas. And that's important. Yes, as a seller, this is your job. You got your quota, you get numbers, you need to be efficient and focus on your work. But at the same time, sales is a team sport. You still need your engineering team sometimes to back you up, or to your point, if you have an account that you're working on and they requested functionality, how could you sell this internally as a rep? Like even individual contributor, that we are talking, right? So what do you think could be potentially a solution without burning a lot of time for sellers just to educate them continuously? Because product will grow, marketing will iterate. So how can we add this to our workflow?
Yeah, well, I think I have an idea, but let me just explain why I know this is harder than I made it sound just a second ago. You're not going to pull AEs off the phones and out of meetings to train them deeply on every role that exists within your company and like why they're there and their KPIs, right? Even if it might help in certain areas, like that's not reasonable. It's a middle manager thing to me. I do think it's worth your frontline management getting trained and enabled on what these people do. Because then, if my frontline sales manager knows the role of a product manager and how they go about making decisions about what is being released within their product, then they can speak intelligently when an AE is frustrated about something that maybe didn't go the way that they wanted it to go, instead of
Mhm,
exacerbating the situation by sort of throwing their hands up and saying, "Hey, I agree. What a terrible choice that was." And
mhm,
I think that layer is probably where, if it were up to me, I would invest the enablement time and resources to make sure that frontline management, and this goes true in customer success organizations and frontline marketing leadership and all of that, where if everyone kind of got it at the level that I think
mhm.
I've been able to through my experience, you'd be rowing in the same direction more often than most people are.
I think, yeah, that's a better approach than maybe focusing on teaching everything to AEs or SDRs. Because to your point, the attention span of a seller, it's just this much. Plus, you're busy selling. I guess that makes sense for middle management just to understand how other functions work. And to your point, we have coaching sessions, hopefully, or one-on-ones that reps can share some of these frustrations, and then managers can basically transfer it to a more relevant messaging to another department internally.
Yeah, those managers can be the filter. So maybe you do learn something that's really poignant and important from a meeting you had with marketing. And then in your team meeting, instead of a 3 hour training about marketing, you'd say the 3 minutes of what you learned that really matters that you need to tell them. It's simple concepts, but like that filtering, I think, is really important when you're trying to lead sales teams or any team, really.
I think, look, the problem right now is managers don't even get any sort of management training. I mean, with more established companies, maybe there are some programs, but I've never seen anyone offering something for internal selling or no other orgs. Yes, you might have some modules or bunch of documentations that nobody looked at, but training those leaders, I think that itself maybe needs some shift in terms of how we run our onboarding processes for our mid-level, leadership. But I wanted to hear from your perspective because you led multiple functions. Let's think about it this way, that hopefully we can add some value today to someone's life. It's not going to be full training, it's not practice, obviously, but what's one thing you wish, more sales leaders understood about how product and marketing teams actually work? If you could give me these two breakdown.
The marketers I've worked with, when I've sat in rooms with them, are genuinely trying to drive the most meaningful leads into the sellers. And I say it that way and it sounds stupid, but how many times has an AE approached someone and said, "Oh, I saw their presentation. They're claiming they hit
Yeah.
their, demand model, but I certainly didn't get any of that."
Cool.
So I've always found it really interesting when I took the time to review even something as simple as a campaign or something like
Mhm.
that we're targeting from a marketing perspective and give feedback. The amount of engagement I got back from the marketing team, like they craved it in terms of like, "Oh,
Mhm.
cool, you had this conversation with a real prospect and they objected to this line of thinking, like maybe we should consider, some change to the way we're messaging
Mhm.
this," things like that.
Yeah.
With product, product managers can be very different. Some love to be in front of customers and talk to them all the time, and they have a really good grasp of voice of customer, and some don't. And by the way, I don't actually think one is necessarily better than the other because there's pros and cons to these approaches.
Mhm.
But the idea that you need to evaluate the product team that you're working with and make sure that you feel like the voice of the customer is being represented. And if it is,
Mhm.
cool, do your part in helping grow the awareness of what that needs to be. And probably more importantly, if it isn't, then it's maybe nothing more important, especially at young tech companies where you have the luxury of trying new things, but also there's huge risk when you take the swing and miss to not really have the voice of the customer represented. And so sometimes it's as simple as like sit in the same room as these people and have legitimate conversations. And then you have to evaluate if those people are the types that are going to turn around and act on sort of the feedback or the ideas that were generated in that. Because that's the other pet peeve of mine that I've seen the bad, like good versions of this and bad versions of this. I mean, how many of us have gone to like a offsite meeting where you spend multiple days talking through something and it sounds great in the conference rooms, and then it's
Mhm.
a month later and nothing's happened? And
Yeah.
I think the mistake people make sometimes is they say, "I did my part of it, and it's everybody else who didn't take the appropriate action." Like the best thing to do is to blame yourself for that and keep pressure on the people, especially as a seller. Keep pressure on the people that you need to rely on to help you
Mhm.
sell, to help you hit your number. So, going back and having documenting actions, following up on that, and doing it in a way where even if it's a peer of yours, I just think that matters. And I would want it done to me, by the way, because I've had plenty of moments where I didn't do the thing I said I was going to do, and I'd prefer someone
Yeah.
to call me on it, right?
Look, I get your point, and I think that's a very smart idea to get sales managers ready to be a middleman between reps, let's say, and different teams. When we have, let's say, SKOs, good companies bring all the teams, they have separate sessions, we can work on real accounts and really dive deep into understanding of what really requires for this client to be successful with us. It's always one off, and I hate one off. I think one off events is just like a tease. You got a little bit of benefit right now. Go be on your own for the next hopefully I don't know 3 month at the end of a quarter, maybe we have another meeting like this. Have you ever seen any companies actually executing this properly as part of, let's say, an ongoing project for middle level, leadership to always be involved and share feedback with other, leadership in different functions?
I mean, the answer is no. I've never seen it done at a like and executed at a level that I think is the right amount. I've seen it done well for pockets of time, and then like a lot of things like this, fire drills pop
Mm,
up, and then it sort of withers away. The thing that popped in my head is something that actually happened at Groupon that I found really interesting, which is we made a pretty heavy investment in sales training. And
mhm.
first time we did it was direct to the AEs. Significant investment, multiple days, like digging deep, and not just sales process stuff, but like a bunch of things related to making sellers better. And when we evaluated that later in the year, didn't do a whole lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the investment was made in management training. And a lot of that, I mean, maybe
Mm,
not exactly what we were talking about. It was more around like the way to have good conversations with your sellers, the way to be vulnerable to the extent that they trust you and you are able to build a relationship where when there's a one off or something bad, you can, have a meaningful convo. But what we found was that actually had a huge impact on quota attainment. So when the money and resources were focused on that layer, it had a grander, whatever the word is, impact on the ability to hit a number. It was a single situation. So you could tell me, like, maybe we just didn't run the AE training as well as we could have. But, like, to me, that really
mhm.
resonated. And it's something that has stuck with me throughout my career, which was I can't bypass that layer and train a team of people
Mhm.
to do something if that layer doesn't understand why we're doing it and believe in it and then have the tools to reinforce. Like, that's where it becomes really important.
This is really cool. Let's talk about this because you experienced it. I've never seen it, but you experienced this is really interesting actually. So AEs didn't maybe adopted, I don't know, maybe they finished their training again, check mark, thing, okay, done, but you didn't see much increase in basically revenue. But with management training, you guys see significant, changes. Why? Like I'm trying to understand. Is it like managers are more mature, they care more about their seat? Like what's the reason?
I think it's because so much of enablement is the ongoing nature of it and the reinforcement of the concepts that are being trained. And you've talked to so many people who run enablement programs, enablement teams. I'm guessing because I did this for about 18 months. Anytime I trained something that the managers didn't believe in,
Yeah.
failed.
Good luck getting adoption.
You'd have the meeting, you'd have the enablement call, you'd run the
Yeah.
training, and you might touch a couple AEs that just grasped it or were
Yeah.
interested enough to do it. But ultimately, it fails. So by
Hmm.
training managers, they were more inclined to put it into practice and continue, like to actually like stick with that, I guess, is the difference if you looked at just the roles. But I think more of it was they continued to be pressured to reinforce in the way that they weren't doing to their own AEs when it was just the AE training. So if I'm a manager,
Mm.
my boss
Yeah.
was saying, did you do the one on one in the format that we were just
Yeah.
trained? How did it go? Tell me what you
Hmm.
learned. Tell me what you're going to do differently next time.
Hmm.
When we did the AE training, maybe some of the managers did that, but certainly
Yeah.
not all of them. And what that meant was the majority of the AEs never got that reinforcement. So they just went to the same habits, probably bad habits that they had before. And
Hmm.
that's the difference. So it's not like someone's better, someone's worse. It's that you go to the managers who own ongoingly meeting with their frontline employees, you have a better chance of getting that reinforcement to happen. And so I think that's why it worked.
So it sounds like managers needed to learn how to hold AEs more accountable, and correct me if I'm wrong. Because with management, it sounds like, again, that senior leadership, they were doing their part, reinforcing it. Hey, just give me a reality check. What you learned. Are you even applying it? What kind of result are you getting? But for AEs, it sounds like, again, that reinforcement was not necessarily, at the level it's supposed to be.
I think so. Yeah. And again, I'm sure someone who was a manager at the time would not like me saying that, but I'm talking about
Yeah.
in the majority, that's what happened.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. And that matters. Like, that's what makes the difference at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
And, some people think, bringing a new training or technology can do magic because you brought it and because the value was clear. Even end users did a trial. Like I always talk about this, like with my clients. Even if you do a POC and you get a bunch of reps to adopt to the platform, don't start celebrating because the job is not done. the majority of your team might actually show resistance as a human being, because change is hard. And even if they see the value on paper and say, okay, this is great, even if internally other reps come and say, this is amazing, maybe these are your top reps, maybe people are more interested in innovation and training and getting better, but not everybody's the same. So that reinforcement, I think, is still needed. Even with all this like AI jazz, you still need human leaders to help with adoption. And as soon as, again, reps get their hands dirty with something valuable, something that adds some value to their life, then I think things could be easier.
This triggered a thought I have about film reviews, like watching calls back as a team and giving feedback. So I've rolled out film reviews 4 different times now, which it's just a fancy way of saying every week or every 2 weeks, we all get together and we have come already watching a discovery call, a pricing presentation, a demo, whatever it is. And we give each other feedback. Right. And I've tried different structures and things like that. And I've gotten better at it each time that I've rolled it out. But generally what happens the first film review you have is, one, it's really hard to get someone to volunteer the call.
Yep.
And two, they give you what they think is their best call, and everyone is really nice to them. Like, everyone is so nice to them about what a great job they did on their best call. And that's not that productive, right? We don't learn a whole lot from those situations. So what I started doing is my first film review would be my call, and I would always have a mole, which is usually one of my best AEs, but someone who is like a peer leader on the AE team, who I would ahead of time say, I need you to rip me apart on this call.
I love this.
Like, not in a nefarious way, in a constructive way. Like, there's plenty of things I did wrong, tell everybody about. And that would be the foundation for what these are supposed to be. And because it would always be something like, I handled an objection and I didn't even acknowledge the fact that they gave an objection. I just started like spouting off a customer story, and they would be like, why did you do that? Like they're sitting there feeling like you're not listening to them. Awesome. And then, how many of us have done that? Well, we've all done that. So you would get into those types of conversations. And then you'd have a film club the next couple of weeks, and it's not perfect right away. It's still the better version of the call, and people are still being nice. But slowly but surely, people are getting a little more comfortable giving constructive feedback. And then every single time I've done this, you're 6 months in. I wish it were faster, but usually it takes about 6 months. People are volunteering their absolute train wreck calls for review, because those are the ones that they're going to learn the most from. And it is so much fun. Everyone I ever have worked with will be like, my favorite thing was the film review calls, because I always showed up and learned something, because people were okay saying, I had no idea what to do in this moment. Can you all give me some thoughts about maybe how I should handle this? And so you have to get there somehow. And that's just the way that I've done it. That has at least had some success.
I love it. And I love it. And I love it. Very difficult to do this in real life for everyone. It requires leadership skills. It requires humility. So the way you build that safe environment to, bring bad calls, so we all can sit down and break it down and share, thoughts, I think extremely valuable. The only challenge with that is time, and many organizations don't have this, coaching culture, and they don't support it from even CRO, level. So I would say this is an extreme value to your team, the way you actually run the sessions, because you just, kind of like open doors. Hey, this is me, basically. I'm your boss sitting in front of you. Look, I screw up too. Like, that's to me the first, foundation, even before we get tactical and get to technicalities and skill gaps and all that stuff. That, look, that's okay to screw up. And I think that's what you've done fantastically.
And let's talk about the time aspect of it, though, because I hear that a lot, right? I can't tell you how many other teams have been like, I know everyone likes it, but we just do not have the time to run a film review. The way I did it, it was every other week. The reviews were 1 hour. The calls were, sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. So you had to watch it beforehand. You maybe had to spend 15 minutes writing down notes. We usually did like 5 set prompt questions, just so everyone came generally prepared to speak to some stuff. So what's that, 2.5 hours? For something that everyone ultimately found to be the most valuable part of their day, their week, their month when we did it. To the point where we had members of other teams that I didn't manage joining my film reviews because they craved that sort of education. And yet their leaders would say they didn't have the time to do it. And so, everyone manages differently. So it's, it kind of is what it is, but I just wholeheartedly believe in this idea that sales actually isn't an individual sport. And even peer to peer, the best teams compete with each other, but like push each other to levels that you don't get if everyone's just a lone wolf.
Look, I love this a lot. And you know what's so funny? I provide AI coaching. So it means like what I try to do is to scale all this stuff and say, hey, you as an individual, you have the safe environment to role play. You have the safe environment to get, coaching on top of your words call, and nobody's gonna know except for you. But I like this idea of getting people in the room for the sake of team building and for the sake of practice itself, because yes, AI could be great. You get coaching from it for sure. But having a team to back you up when you need it, because you build that relationship between them also, because the ripple effect of this is not only that they learn something. Yes, of course, they learn about their mistakes and peers' mistake and all that stuff. But you're building a bond between this team. So they trust each other. They can share when they need help. And I think this is extremely invaluable. Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With Sell Me the Spend AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only, revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at sellmethespend.ai. Now, let me ask you this question. During this, let's say, you said you do it bi-weekly, you used to do it like every 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay. It was 1 hour meeting typically, or 30 minutes? Like how did you
1 hour
manage
meeting.
time?
We did 30 minutes and it always bled over. So we ended up making it an hour.
Can you walk us through the process, like how you exactly ran it?
Yeah. So we shared the call a week in advance, the call that we'd be reviewing. So we gave everyone time to, at their own convenience, review the call. And then we provided, it was always either 4 or 5 sort of prompt questions that everyone was meant to come prepared to answer. And they were basic stuff like, and I can't take credit for the first one, but it was always the best. My SE leader at the time came up with it, which was, if you were writing a newspaper headline for this call, what would it be? And we always kicked off with that. And we had some creative people who made some hilarious headlines out of various calls. So that was always the first thing. There was always some semblance of like, talk about what they did well. So, you compliment them first. Talk about what they could have done better. So you get constructive. The fourth was always, and this wasn't originally a part of it, was show me a part of the call you want to go dig in deeper on. So you actually force people to go clip 15 seconds where an objection gets thrown out, or the choice that was made in a demo where they went to this screen instead of that screen. And then you're just like, why did you do that? Yeah. And then you would go talk about it. And then the fifth was always, do you think the risks were based on the way they closed the call? Like, did they have next steps? Like basic stuff usually, but like, and then you would dive into it. And sometimes it would be pretty straightforward. Like the call would just go where you went question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4. But those weren't the best ones. They were good, but they weren't the best ones. The best ones, we never really made it past like the newspaper headlines, because ultimately what would happen is someone would bring up a topic. Like there was one we had where in the call, it was a pricing presentation. There was like an interesting like discounting strategy that the AE laid out that no one else had seen before. And we literally just talked about that the entire time. And this is like a core principle that I have. I'm not trying to get through the call I had planned. I'm trying to have an engaging call, whether that's an internal meeting or an external meeting or whatever it is. So when they latched onto that, and I felt like it was a worthwhile conversation to have, we just ran with it. And it was like 55 minutes of like the most creative ways to discount it, and how do you put that into a slide, and
Mhm.
wait, are we giving something away here? And could we have done that? Was the entire conversation. It was great. And I had no idea
Mhm.
that that's what that call was going to be when it started, but it's where it went. Having the right instincts to know when you're not getting derailed, you're actually going down a good path versus when you are getting derailed and you need to be like, whoa, 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 let's get back on the course. I think that's a really
Mhm.
important part of running meetings like.
Yeah. And I think that's a skill too. Like is running a discovery conversation with a client. Sometimes you gotta drop all this line of questioning if you notice like people are, I don't know, getting a little bored, not engaged, and ask the hard questions. It sounds like it's pretty much the same way. And my only concern with that is, and you most probably have some solutions for it might not, but I want to ask, during the meeting you talk, everybody enjoys it because that's a problem, or it's a new topic that might happen to anyone else, right? How do you get commitment from the person who brought the call to actually, use this learning on their next calls, or about that specific account, go and try to, save it or get some response from the, prospect by bringing it up this problem, etc., etc. How did you do that?
To me, it was as simple as the connectivity between this group conversation and then the one-on-ones that I have with that individual.
There we go.
Right. So, this is, this is when I ran the enterprise sales team, which was six
Yeah.
AEs. So I'm not, I don't have a
Yes.
50-person team. So I have a lot
Yeah.
of opportunity to have these conversations. And what it allows you to do is to say, well, how about that film review? Like what were your
Mm,
takeaways from that? And you get them to just start talking. And then I always had like the
hmm.
one or two things I was really hoping they would
Yeah.
come up with, or
Yeah.
behaviors they might change.
Hmm.
Most of the time they got there because we talked about it as a group. And if they didn't, I try to guide them and see if I couldn't get them to buy into that being a thing to do. But like it always just came from connecting the one-on-one to that group meeting, which is something I had to learn when I was an early manager at Groupon. I had team meetings, I had one-on-ones, we had trainings. They weren't connected at all. There was no thought behind that. And so, taking the time to be like, okay, I just got off a film review. I need to spend the 20 minutes tonight being like, what does this one-on-one look like with Michael now when that I have in 2 days
Hmm.
based on the conversation that happened in this film? That kind of.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic because you build that repeatable process, if you will, with something really meaningful. It's about their day to day. They're working on that specific account. Let's bring it to the group. Let's break it down. Let's come up with some, at least questions and thoughts. And then during the one on one, we continue that. And then it continues, I believe. Like it could be a cycle. So by next week, you're going to do this, 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 and that. Okay, sure. So next week, how did it go? And then this is great. This is a great practice for sure.
It's something I would encourage every leader to try to roll out and have the patience. Because I mentioned it took 6 months
Mhm.
before it got to like the really
Mhm.
humming version of it. So the first few might be
Yeah.
painful, especially if it's totally net new and you have a bunch of legacy sellers that don't want to share and honestly feel like they're just there to get beat up on. Like you have to try
Yeah.
to find a way to break through that.
So was this an initiative that someone actually initiated? Like it was kind of like part of this corporate training that guys, this is how you're gonna run it? Or where did you learn about this? Like it was something that you came up with?
The film review piece?
Yeah.
No, I can't take credit for it at all. When I left to run product marketing at Reputation, the sales engineering leader, which is the team that I had left to go run product marketing,
Yeah.
started rolling this out. And I just joined because it was a cool call to be on. So I was the one
Yeah.
like, can I join that thing? And those were at the time just demo calls, right? Those were just specifically demos. And slowly but surely, like I saw how cool it was, how like engaged people were, and I just stole it and then ended up using it in my different areas. And then me and the guy that rolled that out are really close, so we still talk all the time. And like, we'll we'll be like, "Ooh, I tried this thing. Oh, it sucked. Don't do that." We keep trying to make it better and do different things and iterate on it, but everything. The same thing has been true every time either one of us has done it, which is it starts painful. You want to ideally get that mole, that person who's bought into it, or who you can get to like rip on you out the gate. And then from there, you just have to stick with it. And eventually you will always start to see a little bit more participation, a little bit more engagement, a little bit more willingness to be critical. And the next thing you know, you have like a queue of 15 calls that are going to take up the next like 6 months of meetings of this. And it's really fun.
You know what's so fun? We were talking about misalignments between different orgs. We switched to coaching because this is a very near and dear topic to me, and it sounds like again you're really excited about the topic as well. So I want to actually continue with that, and maybe we end it with coaching because I think it's such an important topic to cover. What you said is great. I love it. I love it. Like the way you started, you put yourself under the bus right away, guys. I'm number one. Don't worry about it. It's a safe space. And then people, practice and you tie it to one-on-one. This is amazing. Now talk about some of the F-ups that you've noticed that you could do, differently a couple of months after. Initially, when you started, let's say these sessions and actually bringing it to one-on-one, some of the mistakes that you made during those one-on-ones, could you share some of those so people can maybe avoid them?
Yeah, I think holding the worst first film review I ever had, I realized that no one came prepared. Only half the team had watched the call, and only half of that group had taken notes per the 5 prompts that I. And I was actually like mad, and like on the call, was like, "Are you prepared for this? Cool, be mad. That's really going to help get the result." And I think what I realized was that a good first meeting, which is so important for anything you're rolling out, because if the first meeting sucks, you've lost everyone for like indefinitely, as long as the thing is going. You've really got to put in the work. So not only do I have the mole, the person who's going to rip on me on this first call, I talked about it with everyone in the one-on-ones. Hey, I'm curious, have you done the film review yet? No, I'm going to get to it later this week. Oh, cool. When you do you mind sending me ahead of time the clip that you're going to talk to? I want to make sure I have a library of that ready. Like, just make sure they're doing the homework, and having a soft way to hold them accountable with something like that. Or if they said they did, it's like, awesome. Can you tell me, like, what's the thing they really need to work on? Like, what was your most constructive piece of feedback? So I knew once I had done this a few times and screwed it up, at least one thing that everybody was going to speak to on the call. And so if it was the worst version of that, where like no one was really participating or engagement was low, I could be like, Michael, we were actually talking about this in our one-on-one because it came up. You thought it was interesting how so-and-so handled that objection, 20 minutes in. Should we go into that? And then now you're on the spot and you'd be like, oh, yeah. And, and then we're sort of get it going. Doing the legwork ahead of time for that first one, where if it goes wrong, you have a couple levers to pull to start getting a conversation going, I think is really important.
That's very smart, like doing it with finesse rather than force by just engaging them with a good question. Like, hey, we were chatting about this. What do you think? And that kind of like teach them that I got to be prepared for this thing because I might be on the spot too.
And it wasn't the whip, it was, shit, Phil's going to ask me about this thing, isn't he? But like in a way that is, and then hopefully they end up thinking it's really valuable. But like it's because I'm doing it in a way that is very conversational. Like, I thought it was so cool the way he did that. Did you watch that call yet? And you're like, oh, no, I didn't. Oh, you got to. It's really cool. Then, I start going into pieces of it, stuff like that.
Yeah. I love that. It requires a lot of patience, but I think that's the best practice because nobody wants to be bossed around. Like,
a lot of impatience at first that pays off in the long run, I think. Because once it's in it, I barely spoke on these things once we got to that 6-month point. Like, barely said a word.
That's true. You basically build that muscle memory for them. Hey, these are the expectations without being harsh because we're going to practice it all the time. And by the time, again, you do it a couple of times, it seems like people will start, getting it and doing them automatically. Look, man, I really enjoyed this conversation. If someone wants to reach out to you, first and foremost, can they and how?
Yeah, of course. I mean, LinkedIn is probably the easiest, most straightforward way for me. So look up Phil Rapisardo on LinkedIn. I'm in a really interesting point. I mentioned my unemployment off the jump. I am having so many wonderful conversations with people that I don't know, that are like loosely affiliated with my network, that are just from, I don't know, people with shared interests, people with a passion for this kind of thing. And I love it. So if you just want to chat, if anyone just wants to have a quick conversation, just let me know. I love talking about this stuff. We didn't even get into like a bunch of psychology of selling things that I'm just a little bit obsessed with, probably to a too much of a degree. But like, there's just so many things related to this that I find so fascinating.
Maybe we get you back on the show again for, another topic and
If you'll
dive
have me,
deep
Michael,
into
I'm
that.
always happy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. I guess that's pretty much it for today. Until next time, see you guys soon. Bye for now.